been looking forward to this. I'm so dedicated to your same mission of lifting people up and bringing them together, starting at the youngest ages. Thank you for your passion for this cause. And it's wonderful to see so many old friends and so many new friends here to talk about this mission that really can transform our society. And in your hands, I believe that it will. I've got 35 minutes or so to give some remarks about my favorite subject in education, which is happiness. Education and happiness are not often linked, but that's what I've dedicated my life to doing. I've done a lot of different things in my career. I was the president of a think tank for a while. I actually started off my career as a professional French horn player, of all things. God bless America. You can change when it's time to change. But over the past 5 years, I've taken my background as a behavioral social scientist and dedicated it to the following mission. I want to teach teachers to be teachers of happiness. I have a lab where I teach at Harvard University. I have a lab called the Leadership and Happiness Lab dedicated to creating teachers of happiness. That doesn't mean they need to focus exclusively on the science of happiness like I do, but they can embed the science into their work. And if I do my job in the next half hour, you'll get a little flavor for how I think all of us can do this in our leadership journey. Now, the class that I teach at the Harvard Business School is called Leadership and Happiness. It's one of the most oversubscribed classes at the Harvard Business School. How strange that the happiness class is more highly subscribed than many business classes at the Harvard Business School. Well, there's a reason for that. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on, the supply chain management class across the hall, but the truth of the matter is that what we have to impart to our students, whether they're kindergartners or graduate students, is that they're all startup entrepreneurs, actually. And the startup is their lives. And they're the entrepreneurs. And the fortune they're trying to build is love and happiness. That's what I try to get across. And that starts with knowledge about how our well-being actually works. I have 180 students every year in my class. I have 400 on the waiting list, and there's even an illegal Zoom link they think I don't know about. So what am I telling them? Well, I start off my class with a simple question. What is it? This thing that we all want, this thing that we wish we had, since the beginning of time, presumably, we want to be happier people, but it's elusive, it's hard. The reason that it's difficult, well, there's a lot that goes into that, but the main problem that we have is that we don't know how to define it. Happiness, according to most of my students, is a feeling. I ask them, what is it? What's happiness? And one after the other, they'll say, it's the feeling I get when I'm with the people that I love. Why am I looking forward to Thanksgiving? So I can be with the people that I love. Hopefully. It's the feeling I get when I'm doing something that I enjoy. Feelings. They're talking about feelings. And I say, incorrect. Happiness is not a feeling, and that's very good news. If happiness were a feeling, you'd just be chasing it. It would depend on how you slept last night, or how your breakfast suited you, or whether your spouse shouted at you on the phone, or you'd just be looking for it over the course of your life, and you might get it sometimes, and usually you wouldn't. Fortunately, that's not the right definition. Happiness is not a feeling. Feelings are evidence of happiness, like the smell of your turkey on Thanksgiving will be evidence of your Thanksgiving dinner. You don't want the smell to be the same thing. That would be a disappointing Thanksgiving at best. And the truth of the matter is that happiness is more or less like our meal. If I'm going to explain, as many of you know, what the Thanksgiving dinner is, technically it's really just 3 things: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. That's not a very romantic way to look at Thanksgiving dinner, but it's technically true. Those are called the macronutrients of food. Well, happiness, in its best scientific understanding, is also 3 macronutrients. Here's what they are. Here are the component parts of happiness: enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. You want to be a happier person? You need a strategy for those 3 things. Do we want our students to grow up and to be happier people? They need to know how to enjoy their lives, how to have satisfaction in their accomplishments, and to find the meaning of their lives. That's the secret. Now, not so easy, because it turns out that none of those things is straightforward. What I want to take some time to do right now is to explain how I talk about this with young people, and how I train teachers to talk about this with everybody. Enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. And the strategies all of us can pursue to get those three things. Let's start with enjoyment. Straightforward. Pleasure, right? You know, back in the 60s, the hippies used to say, if it feels good, do it. That's a great strategy for ruining your life, right? I remember my dad, you know, and I remember watching some hippie on television in the late 60s or early 70s saying that. I think probably at the Woodstock Music Festival in 1969. They didn't let me go. I was 5. Squares. Anyway, and my dad heard this hippie saying that, if it feels good, do it. And my dad said, that's the end of America. You know? He was kind of right. But the problem with that is that's a strategy for pleasure. That's a strategy to pursue pleasure. And that's not the secret to happiness. The secret to happiness is actually converting pleasure into enjoyment, and this is something that a lot of young people don't understand, and if they did, their lives could be much, much better. Let me explain. Pleasure emanates from a part of the brain called the limbic system. This is a console that creates emotions and drives and feelings inside your brain. It was evolved over about a 40 million year period. Why do we have emotions? You know, people think there's good feelings and bad feelings. No such thing. There's no such thing as bad feelings. There's positive and negative emotions, but all they are is information so that you understand what's going on outside of you and you can react appropriately. Were it not for your so-called bad emotions, your negative, avoidant feelings, you'd be dead in a week. You need your fear, you need your anger, you need your sadness, you need your disgust, you need these things. Now, they can be maladapted and hyperactive and create an interference and a problem in your life, to be sure, but there are no bad feelings. All the limbic system does is gives you drives and emotions and ideas about what you're supposed to do or not do. All your feelings do is help you survive, and that's what pleasure is all about. Pleasure is simply a signal to you that you can go someplace and get some calories or find some mates, survive, and pass on your genes. It's evolutionarily really pretty simple. But that's not a strategy for life. There's a part of your limbic system is the reward system of your brain. It's called the ventral striatum. And when you tap it, you feel good. When you tap it, you feel joy. All pleasure does is it taps the ventral striatum. That's the reason that so much human ingenuity has gone into supercharging things to give you more and more and more pleasure. And what does that lead to? Addiction, misery, self-subjugation. That's what we see all around us. That's what we're so worried about for our kids. That's what we're so worried about with our students. The pursuit of pleasure is the road to misery, as a matter of fact. But that doesn't mean, of course, that pleasure's bad. Here's how you take pleasure and make it into a component of happiness. You take the source of pleasure and you add two things: people and memory. People and memory. Why? Because the limbic system gives you the notion of pleasure, and when you add people and memory, it moves the experience of pleasure into the prefrontal cortex of your brain, the big meaty bumper of tissue behind your forehead. And that's where you can remember it. That's when you can socialize it. That's when it becomes enjoyment, which is an enduring source of actual happiness. So here's the thing. I don't have to tell my adult kids not to do things. I have to tell them to add things. The biggest problem that we have in addiction is that people will tap their ventral striatum again and again and again compulsively, not socially, and not making memory. There's a reason that the Anheuser-Busch Corporation, which runs a lot of beer ads, never features in their beer ad a guy alone in his apartment pounding a 12-pack. Never seen it, right? Why? Because, to be sure, a lot of people use the product that way, right? But that's not a healthy way to use the product, and we all know it. That's a dangerous way to use the product. Why? Because it stops at pleasure. Nobody's ever said, my secret to happiness is methamphetamine. No, because that stops with pleasure. Why do we worry about the scourge of pornography? Because all it does is it stops with pleasure. It doesn't add people and memory. What do we need to do? Well, in the Anheuser-Busch commercial, the guy is drinking a beer with his brother. and his friends. He's adding people and memories such that that beer is a source of enjoyment and the enjoyment is a source of happiness. This is the thing. Here's what I tell my students. I say, if something could be addictive, which many things are, never do it alone. That's the rule. Now, many things are great to do alone, like walking in the forest or saying your prayers, and they're a great source of happiness. But if something can give you a lot of dopamine in your brain, can tap your ventral striatum, could be used compulsively, don't do it alone. That's the rule. This is much simpler than being a puritanical scold and saying don't do anything. No, do it together with others. Make it into a source of enjoyment. This is an example of how the neuroscience, the new neuroscience of happiness, can actually lead to some very prescriptive and practical suggestions for young people today and quite frankly for all of us. That's part one of happiness. Part two, a little bit more complicated, satisfaction. During the coronavirus lockdowns, which were terrible for all of us, we all hated them. I was in Massachusetts where they were particularly virulent. Some places the virus never got, like Texas apparently. But in Massachusetts, I mean, the virus was there, let me tell you, and we were all stuck. I had one child still at home. I had one who was, doing his thing, working. I had one who was in the Marines, and there was no evidence of the virus in the Marine Corps, I can tell you. But my youngest daughter, Marina, she was in her senior year in high school, entirely at a distance in the suburbs of Boston. And it was misery. Every day was misery. I would come down every morning and she would be in math class on the laptop and at the kitchen table having no good educational experience. It was a scandal. It's ridiculous. And every day she would look kind of glum. And I came down one morning expecting to find her the same as it always was. And she was laughing at the laptop. And I said, obviously, honey, you're not in math class. What are you looking at? She says, I'm watching a YouTube video. I said, what is it? She said, it's a video of a very old man dancing like a chicken and trying to sing. And I said, well, I got to see it because I'm a shallow person. So I come around to the other side of the table to take a look at the old man dancing like a chicken and trying to sing. It was Mick Jagger. So she didn't know who he was. Kids these days, right? And it was a concert in 2017 where he was singing, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. And she said, why do you people like this? Right? There was a bunch of baby boomers in the audience doing this, And I said, it gave me an opportunity, right? Because, she's kind of a chip off the old block. Now she's in college. She's a junior in college studying psychology and neuroscience. She wants to go into the family business, which is great. So this was an opportunity to talk shop with my little girl. And I said, honey, it's not the song. It's a dumb song. The thing is, it's the message. I can't get no satisfaction, but I try and I try and I try. What's up with that? Well, here's what's up with that. Satisfaction is a real macronutrient, a real component of your happiness. It is the joy you get after struggle. That's satisfaction. Here's the paradox of human life. You must suffer for you to get satisfaction. If my students cheat on one of my exams, which is very easy to do, they'll get no satisfaction when I give them an A. But if they work hard for it, stay up all night studying, really work on their paper, and get an A and they earn it, it's tremendously satisfying. It's incredible. We must struggle for us to feel human satisfaction. It's one of the paradoxes of life, to be sure. That's one of the reasons that unhappiness isn't bad. On the contrary, suffering can be very good in this way, and we have to teach our children and teach our students to defer their gratification, not just so they can succeed, but so that they can get satisfaction and therefore that they can be happy. Deferral of gratification is important to happiness in this way. But then arrives the bigger paradox behind it, like the Himalayan mountains of the difficulty of happiness, which is that you can't get no satisfaction. Actually, it's not true. If you couldn't get no satisfaction, you wouldn't keep trying and trying and trying. The problem is you can't keep no satisfaction. I've done research on when people get a bonus or a raise at work, what's the day they most enjoy it and get the most happiness from it? Is it the day they find out about it or the day it shows up in their check? It's the day they find out about it. By a long shot. I mean, your boss says, you're the linchpin of this company. 40% bonus. And you call up your spouse and you say, honey, we're going to put in the pool. It's just fantastic, right? And you go home and you pop a champagne cork and you're feeling really good. And 3 weeks later, when it shows up in your check, you're like, oh yeah, the money. Why is that? Because you can't keep no satisfaction. Neuroscientists know why this is, by the way. It's not you. There's nothing wrong with you. When your spouse says something good happens to you, and then 2 days later you're your grouchy old self. That's Mother Nature. That's evolution. Here's what's happening. There's a process in your brain called homeostasis. Homeostasis is the tendency to return to all of your biological equilibria. So if you're in the gym with me this morning and you're running on the treadmill, and for cardiovascular health, you want to elevate your pulse to 135 beats per minute. As soon as you get off, you want your heart to start going back to its natural resting place so that you don't die. That's homeostasis. That's good for you. The same thing is true for you emotionally. Mother Nature makes you think that when something good happens, you'll enjoy it forever. When something bad happens, you're going to hate it forever. She wants you to think that so that you'll be motivated to act in a particular way. But it can't remain forever, so you can be ready for the next thing. That's homeostasis. And she's fooling you. People ask me all the time, should I move to California for the weather? Will I be happier if I move to California for the weather? I got the data. The sunshine will elevate your mood for 6 months. The taxes are forever. Right? Choose wisely. Yeah. I'm looking at Jeb. Move to Florida. Anyway, so this is the tyranny. The real tyranny of satisfaction is you can't keep it. What do? Does that just mean you're doomed for moments of joy and then searching and running and running? The running, by the way, is called the hedonic treadmill. I'm looking for the feeling, but it's moving against me all the time. There actually is an answer to this. See, I've been casting aspersions at old Mother Nature all the way through the talk so far, and the truth is that Mother Nature doesn't care about your happiness. Mother Nature wants you to pass on your genes and survive. Happiness is your business. So if you want to be a happier person, and we want to teach our students to be happier people, we need to teach them to stand up to many of their natural impulses. And this is a perfect example. Mother Nature says, and the marketing colossus, and our economy, and our culture, they reinforce the idea that we'll get permanent satisfaction with one strategy: more. Give me more. I want more. More what? More all of it. More money, more power, more pleasure, more fame, more admiration, more contacts, more relationships, more Instagram followers, more of everything. But that's wrong, of course, because you can't keep no satisfaction, because of the hedonic treadmill, because of homeostasis. So what's the answer? The answer is a more divine path of understanding true lasting satisfaction, which is not have more. The real formula for your satisfaction, if you want to keep it, is thinking of it as a fraction, where the numerator is your haves and the denominator is your wants. All the things you have divided by all the things that you want. Now, you can keep trying to maximize that numerator inefficiently, ephemerally, or you can start trying to manage the denominator. Do you have a wants management strategy in your life? Do you teach young people that they need to moderate and manage their wants? Or do you just fire up the numerator? Go do more. Make a bucket list, kids. A bucket list of all your desires and cravings and ambitions. I get it that ambition is good. I'm all about ambition. I'm an American. My ancestors didn't come to this country saying, can't wait to get to America where there's a better system of forced income redistribution. No. They wanted to start a farm and build their lives, and I admire that. I love that. But I also know that pure haves won't get it done. You don't need to just add brushstrokes to the canvas of your life, because your canvas will be full and dense. You need to chip away the sculpture of your life until you find the beautiful you that's inside, getting rid of the detritus of the things that don't actually matter. This, by the way, my friends, is the reason that social media is so damaging to young people, because it's all have more, have more, have more. There's nothing on social media that says, want a little less. Curate your wants a little bit. Spiritual elevation. It's good for us. It's good for them. Here's the question. Do you have a wants management strategy? Do you teach wants management? That's the secret to lasting satisfaction, and that's number 2. Now, we're on to number 3. You didn't think that defining happiness was going to take so long, but I hope it's useful because this one is the most complicated. This is the trickiest. But this is where the real promise exists in the way that we can pass on the gift of greater happiness to young people. Meaning. Now, meaning is so hard because, I can go without enjoyment for a while and be happy. I can go without satisfaction for a pretty long time because I'm good at deferring gratification. But I can't go for a single day. I can't go for a single hour without a sense of meaning and be a happy person. Can't be done. The problem is, what is it? Not just what is the meaning of life, what's the meaning of meaning? This is a really big riddle for a lot of people. Probably for a bunch of you, this is hard, and it certainly is for young adults today. This is the number one problem that I see for my students. 55% of my students are getting mental health treatment at Harvard. 55%, that's a lot. And when I dig in, because I'm the happiness professor, when I dig into the problem, it's meaning problems that I'm seeing with them. So what is meaning? Philosophers and psychologists agree that it's really 3 things. Once again, it's coherence in life. Things happen for a reason. You have to have an idea of why things happen in your life. It's purpose, which is direction and goals. You have to be going in a direction, making progress toward particular goals. And it's significance. A belief that it would matter if you didn't exist. These are the 3 parts of meaning. Now, in my work, I've actually figured out a 2-question exam to see if there's a meaning crisis in your life, okay? A 2-question exam. Now, to pass this exam, you don't have to have particular answers. You just have to have answers that you really believe. Not politically correct answers your mother would approve of or that sound good on social media. No, real answers to 2 questions. So I'm going to give you the exam. And if you can't pass the exam, that's actually really good news. Why? Because you're going to know what to go in search of, the answers to these questions. It's almost this simple. Question number 1. What's your answer to this? Why am I alive? Now, you can answer that by saying who created you. You can answer that by saying what you're supposed to do. But you have to have an answer. Why am I alive? Second, gets harder. For what would I be willing to die today? It's a tricky question, isn't it? For a lot of people, it's like, I don't know. Nothing, I guess. You failed the quiz, but now you know what to go looking for. When you see somebody find the answers to these questions, the transformation is almost miraculous. I've seen it in my own kids. I have adult kids. You met my daughter Maureen a minute ago. She's now 20. My older kids are 25 and 23. My 25-year-old has got it going on. He's a math teacher in the outskirts of Boston in a high school. Has a son. It's great. His middle son, my middle son, our middle son, Carlos, he was our kind of problem child. A middle son, after all. The middle child always gets 90% of the family oxygen and thinks it's 10%, And, and in high school, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. It's like, hey, the principal's on the phone again. Yeah, he had us on speed dial. Carlos didn't show up today, I don't see Carlos. Carlos is getting a D in math. Carlos is not passing history. Carlos might not graduate on time. Never living up to his potential. And, my wife Esther, such an optimist. She says, at least we know he's not cheating. It's like, it's just the worst. So when he's a senior, I did the same thing I do with all my kids. When my kids I'm a business school professor, right? So when my kids are a senior in high school, I say, remember, you're the entrepreneur of the business of your life. You're the entrepreneur, right? I'm the venture capitalist, right? So I get a business plan. You got to write a business plan for the next 5 years. Your life is not going to be exactly like the business plan, but you got to have a business plan if I'm going to invest. Okay? Cool. Right. Carlos writes his business plan, and it's just misery. It's completely unoriginal. I'm going to go to college, and when I go to college, then I'm going to play some sports. I'm like, no, you're not. Don't roll me. You know how I know he's rolling me when he says he's going to go to college? Because I'm Carlos. I tried to go to college when I wasn't ready. I made it 10 months before they invited me to pursue my excellence elsewhere. Right? So, and then I went off and, I was a musician all the way through my 20s. That was my gap decade. you know? And I made it back, and I graduated right before my 30th birthday, and then, you know, went off to graduate school and had a new life. Fine, but it was a good life, I have to say. It wouldn't have been good if I'd really tried to, you know, grind through 4 years of college. You know, I believe that there's a path for everybody. I'm a super advocate of education, which means getting education when you can use it, especially for young people. So I sent back Carlos's business plan for revisions. I said, try again. How are you going to find the answers to your questions, son? And he came back with something really interesting. He said, I want to work hard with my hands outside, manual labor, alone. I said, okay, what's your plan for that? He became a wheat farmer in Idaho. For 2 seasons, for 15 months, he was a wheat farmer. He was the low man on the team. He was picking rocks out of the soil in the winter. It was unbelievable. Mending fences, cutting down dead trees, driving a combine 16 hours a day during harvest, made a bunch of money. And then, part 2, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps. Today, that's 4 years ago. Today, he's Corporal Carlos Brooks, Scout Sniper Platoon. Yeah. 23 years old. My son's a Special Operations Marine. It's a scary job for me, by the way. Not for him, but for me, because, you know, when I can't track his phone and he's someplace remote, he calls it a field trip. But he found his answers. I mean, he's 23, he's married, he's got it going on. And the reason is because he's got his answers. I asked him, Carlos, why are you alive? Because God made me to serve others. Solid. For what are you willing to die today? For my faith, for my family, for my fellow Marines, and for the United States of America. Boom. Very solid. Now, I'm not advocating that you adopt those answers. I'm advocating that you adopt your answers and that you lead the kids on a search for theirs. See, if he had adopted my answers, which are different, perhaps, I'm not a Marine. It wouldn't have meant anything. And that's the point, isn't it? This is the individuality in which we can design this science to suit our lives if we learn how to teach the knowledge. That's why it's so powerful. That's why I'm so passionate about this. That's why I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. Because I saw it in my kids, I see it in my students, I see it in me, quite frankly. So those are the 3 parts. Enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning, and it turns out they're not straightforward. They take practice, and they take teaching, and they take habit formation, they take sharing. But then you got to ask yourself, why is it, this is one of the great paradoxes of happiness as well, that 2 people can have the same basic macronutrient profile, and one person's more ebullient and cheerful than the other. You've met those chronically cheerful, annoying people, you know? Or grumpy people. What is it about the differences that we have, let's say the metabolism of our happiness? And I go back to that metaphor on purpose. I could give any 2 of you the same 5,000 calorie Thanksgiving meal that you're about to eat on Thursday, and one of you would gain more weight than the other. The reason is because you're metabolically different in the way you process calories. Metabolism largely comes from 3 different sources: your genes, your circumstances, and your habits. Those are the 3 things that really change your metabolism. And the same thing is true for your happiness. Any 2 of you can have the same levels of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning, but one of you would naturally have a better mood elevation than the other. You'd have a higher sense of well-being at your resting state than the other. And the reason for that is the same thing: your genetics, your circumstances, and your habits. Now, the reason I'm going to talk about this for a second is because I'm going to get to the habits part, which is really the payoff. This is the thing I want to leave you with, is the happiness habits that you can be thinking about, and if I do my job, you'll be talking about today. But let's start with the genetics. I don't want it to be true, but 50% of your baseline resting mood balance is genetic. We know this from identical twins that were separated at birth and adopted into separate families. We know it's a very depressing fact, right? I mean, your mother literally made you unhappy. Or happy, you know, it depends on your mother, of course. But that's not bad news, because it turns out that when you have that information, you can design your habits to manage your genetics. You need to know the truth about yourself. Look at your parents, look at your grandparents, understand yourself. There's nothing wrong with you if you have a bias toward gloominess. It simply means that this is your baseline resting state of nature, and that's fine. But that means you need better habits than the person down the block. So we're going to get to habits in a minute, but let me tell you about many cases in which you know your genetics, your habits make that much more difference. 50% of your tendency to abuse alcohol is genetic, 50%. But if you came to me and said, hey, Arthur, I got a problem. My mom drank too much, my dad was a drunk, all four of my grandparents abused alcohol, I guess I'm doomed to be an alcoholic. I'd say, wrong. I have a special new technology that can turn the genetic proclivity to alcoholism from 50% to 0%. Here's a special technique. It's called don't drink, right? So that's important because that's your habit. Some people can take it, some people can't. You got to know your background is what it comes down to. And the same thing is true for your happiness. So stay tuned for habits. The second part of your happiness is circumstantial. Some people have better luck than others. Some people are facing better circumstances than others. And we all face the good and bad in our life. Good experiences and bad experiences. Good times and bad times. You're going to get it no matter what you do. But here's the thing. It doesn't last because of homeostasis. Remember that? You think that if your beloved breaks up with you, you'll be sad forever. No, you won't. 2 weeks, you'll start feeling better. 6 months, you'll be dating somebody else. My students are having breakups constantly, and I have to reassure them that Mother Nature is fooling them. Same thing is true for the good circumstances. You get the big raise, you get the big promotion, whatever you wanted in your career happens, or you get married, you buy the house. It's great, but it doesn't last because of homeostasis. Circumstances don't last. However, you can design your circumstances to be systematically better if you have the right habits. That's 25% of circumstances, and that leaves 25% for habits directly, and this is the best news of the day. If you have the right happiness habits, you can directly manage 25% of your happiness and engineer your circumstances and manage your genetics. But you got to have the right habits. You got to have good happiness hygiene. This is lesson 1 for my students at Harvard and any place else that will let me speak. Now, I could give you 10,000 happiness habits, but they're mostly trivial. There's only 4 that really matter. 4 accounts that we need to put deposits in every day. 4 things that we need to do. This is the happiness 401k. Okay? Here's what they are. Your faith, your family, your friendship, and your work. Those are the big 4. Now, let me be a little bit more specific because I could be misinterpreted easily. When I say faith, I don't mean my faith. I'm a Catholic, most important thing in my life. But as a social scientist, I will tell you that there are many paths that will get you to the transcendence that you need to be a happier person, not even necessarily religious paths. Faith is a placeholder for something that makes you small and the universe big. You need to transcend the boring psychodrama of your life. You know, if I'm left to my devices, I'll be thinking about, my commute and, if my flight is late and what I'm going to have for lunch and what I'm going to watch on TV and what I'm thinking about and me. It's so tedious. But if I can zoom out, of the majesty of the universe, if I can become small every day, my happiness dramatically improves. I could bore you with the neuroscience of why this is true, but you know it is true, that you need your path. Maybe that's studying the Stoic philosophers. Maybe that's a meditation practice. Maybe that's walking in nature before dawn with no devices. Maybe that's studying the fugues of Johann Sebastian Bach. Or maybe, like me, it's the faith of your youth. But you need something, and you need it every day. That's number 1, faith. Family. Family life is, of course, the most mystical set of love relationships because they're very powerful, but you didn't choose them. And God knows you wouldn't have chosen them in so many cases. These are the people who can drive you insane, and you didn't even choose that relationship. Why is it so important to you? Well, I could explain the mechanics of it. I could explain the biology of oxytocin, the so-called love molecule, the neuropeptide in the brain that links you to your kin, that links you to the people that you love. Physiologically links you to them. But that notwithstanding, it's still a miracle, isn't it? Here's the most depressing statistic from my field. 1 in 6 Americans today is not talking to a family member because of politics. That's craziness. That's an unforced error, as they say in baseball. There's one reason to have a schism with family members, and that's abuse. And differences in political opinion are not abuse. notwithstanding what powerful people in politics and in media and on social media want to tell us. They are profiting when we hate. Third is friendship, and I'm talking to a bunch of leaders here. You're surrounded by people all day long, and yet some of you are lonely. Here's the reason. You have a lot of friends, right? But ask yourself, are they real friends or deal friends? See, you know the difference. The difference is that deal friends are very useful to you. Real friends are useless. Do you have enough useless friends? I don't mean worthless. I have those too. Do you have enough useless friends that simply love you? That takes work, by the way. You're busy people. You're total strivers. I get it. And it's very easy to fall away from the people who simply love you. They're not impressed with you because you're a big cheese, because you're the boss, because you're the person in charge. They just love you for who you are. Do you have enough people like that in your life? If you don't, you're going to be a lonely leader, bottom line. And you cannot have that circumstance for you and be a happy person. And last but not least is work. I've studied different jobs, different careers, different career paths, different professions. What brings the most happiness? It's hard to find. Public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector, not significant. Above average income, below average income, not significant. High education, low education, blue collar, white collar, no collar, not significant. Two things are significant for you to really love your work. You need to earn your success and you need to serve others. Earn success is the belief that you're creating value with your life and value in the lives of other people. You all have that. That's why you're here. That's why I admire you, because you're earning your success in a way that you create so much value in the lives of other people. But you must be recognized for that accomplishment. And the people who work for you need to earn their success as well. Are you recognizing the accomplishments of others so that they see the value they're creating? Number one. Two, are you serving other people? Once again, you have that in abundance, which is why you're here. Do the people who work for you believe that they're serving other people who need them? The basis of human dignity is being needed, and for most of us, it actually comes through our work. If you can say, I'm earning my success and I'm serving others, then you're passionate about your work and it'll be a source of joy, and I bet that's true for 99% of you. But the real question is, what percentage of the people who work for you get that? And that's the important thing, the important gift that we can bring, and the important lesson that we can teach our students. So where are we? Let me sum up before we go to our conversation portion of this part of the program. Number one, you can be happier, but you have to do the work, and the work starts with actual knowledge. Second point that I want to make is that the search for pleasure, which is our society is bathing in the search for pleasure, is wrong-headed, not because pleasure is bad, but because it's incomplete. And we need to teach ourselves and others that we need to have a culture of enjoyment, not pleasure. Three, satisfaction means enduringly the management of wants, not haves. Are you doing that? Four, for meaning, you need to answer two questions. Why am I alive, and for what am I willing to die today? Can you answer those questions? The next big point is that there's a happiness set of habits that starts with faith. What is your transcendental path? Are you walking a transcendental path? Are you looking for one? What does your relationship with your family look like? How do you need to touch that up? Thanksgiving's coming soon. It can be nice or it can be painful. And a lot of that is in our hands. It's a good opportunity for all of us to look at that part of the portfolio. Next is our friendships. Take out a piece of paper and write down the 10 people with whom you have the most contact. And then put R's and D's after their name. That's not Republican or Democrat. That's real and deal. You need lots and lots of R's. Probably fewer D's. And last but not least, are you dedicating your work to the good of others? I bet you are. Are you setting up an environment where other people can as well? And are you teaching young people that this is the essence of how work can be rewarding and fulfilling and joyful? This is the way that we can all use the science of happiness to lift ourselves up. And you can teach it as well. And that's the last point. If you want to remember the things that I've said in the last 35 minutes, which was a lot of words, the way for you to do that is to teach other people this technology. It doesn't require a PhD. What it requires is an interest and a sincere desire to lift other people up and bring them together. And if you need materials on that, go to my website and download them. They're there for free. And I would be delighted to be of any assistance that I can to you in that journey, because that's how I get happier. The source of my happiness is sending it to you, who can send it to others, and we create a movement that starts in Atlanta, Georgia on this very day, of a happiness rebellion against a culture that militates against it, and a sense of purpose and mission that has the most progressive educators in the country dedicated to the pursuit that is the beginning of this great nation. God bless you for your work, and thank you for having me today.
Please welcome ExcelliNet board member and former majority leader of the House of Representatives, Eric Cantor.
Well, Arthur, it's great to be here with you, and I will say I am once again happier to having heard you this morning. I've also, as I do every time I'm with you, I learn something, and I think I have Carlos syndrome because I too am a middle child, and it sort of explains what I was about thinking, that I got about 10% of the attention when I actually got 90%. So I'm going to just preface my sort of questions with that. You're dealing with Carlos again.
How did your parents take it when you said you were a Republican?
Listen, I think that's a longer discussion again. But listen, I listen to what you say, and I know that you talk about the tyranny of happiness and sort of this counterintuitive notion that happiness in life comes through struggle, right? And and I know we have a lot of educators in the room, we have a lot of members of state assemblies, politicians, statewide elected officials. It's unbelievable with what we're dealing today in terms of the incentive system. Right. And talk a little bit about sort of the trajectory in happiness when we see on display, even in Washington yesterday or the day before, and people threatening and having almost at fisticuffs in the United States Senate committee. Yeah. How does that go viral, and what are we supposed to do about that in terms of happiness?
Yeah, to look at the data about the progress that we've had materially in the United States, the freedom that we have in the United States, the security you have in the United States, we should be much happier than we've ever been. I mean, the truth of the matter is that we focus on the negative because humans tend to focus on the negative, and we have a political establishment and a media culture that valorize the most outrageous behavior. And all of this is reflected in the happiness trends that we see in the United States. I look at these trends a lot, and they're not good. As we're getting richer, as we're getting freer, as we're getting more secure, happiness has been declining for a long time, really since the early 90s. You find that happiness is in gradual decline in the United States, many other countries around the world, but it's really most pronounced right here in America. So I gotta ask why, and there's really two answers for why that's happening. One is climate and the other's weather. I don't mean that literally. That's a metaphor, obviously. There's kind of the gradual change of the climate of happiness, and then there's these storms that have been giving us downdrafts in happiness. So the climate problem is that the 4 happiness habits that I talked about just a minute ago are all in decline. Faith is in decline in this country, both formal and informal faith and spirituality are in wholesale decline, especially with younger generations. This is horrible for people's happiness because it hurts them in their search for meaning. Family life is being degraded. Like, people aren't talking to their family members because of politics, and we're being encouraged to do so. Look, that 2 major parties have both put out guides recently on how to argue with your relatives about politics at Thanksgiving. It's like, why don't you just tell me how to choke on a turkey bone too? I mean, it's like, thank you very much. And the friendship has been in decline for a long time. I mean, we have a really nice Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. He's a terrific Surgeon General in the United States today. He wrote a book on loneliness. I had him on my show, and I said, what's the biggest public health crisis in America? And I expected him to say, the COVID or guns or opioids or something. He said loneliness. He thinks that loneliness is leading to these deaths of despair, and he's right. The truth is that you're about half as likely as you were in 1990 to say that you have somebody who knows you well. How is that happening? Well, this is going to be related to a storm I'll tell you about in a minute. And last but not least is people have less and less satisfaction they're taking in their work, and this has been dramatically exacerbated by COVID-19 and remote work. Then the storms. This is where it really gets ugly. You know, as an economist, I saw all these data on happiness showing that happiness took a huge dive in 2008, 2009, didn't recover. And I'm thinking, the financial crisis and the long tail, that's wrong. It was the apps on our phones with social media that were adopted in 2008, 2009. You had John Haidt with you last night. He's an old friend of mine and a collaborator of mine. And he's a militant on this because he's got the data, and the data don't lie. When people are all adopting social media, the social media platforms, and they're entering into their lives with remote devices on apps and it's in front of their faces all the time, you're going to see loneliness and self-harm skyrocket. That is causal at this point. It's unambiguously the case. And so there's a lot that we can do. I mean, it is insane that there's still phones in schools. It is insane that we're doing that. We need teachers and superintendents and politicians and leaders in communities to say, this is going to stop. At least there should be a safe zone for a few hours a day where young people are not actually depriving themselves of the neuropeptide of oxytocin, eye contact and touch, because they're staring at social media and binging it instead of actually having in-person relationships. That's number one. Number two is political polarization. Cancel culture, political hatred that's being fomented by the colossus of media and politics in America, which has invaded almost every corner of our society. When you hate somebody for any reason, the one who gets unhappier is you. Right? The Buddha one time very famously said that hatred is like picking up a hot coal to throw at somebody. The one who's most burned is you. That's true. Hatred is horrible for your happiness, and we're being encouraged to hate. 93% of Americans, here's the good news, hate how divided we become. But the bad news is that 7% don't hate how divided we become, and they're in public office, and they're sitting in New York in media headquarters. And they're making money and getting votes and followers, or just getting their jollies from seeing us hate each other, and that's especially deleterious with young adults. And last but not least is the coronavirus epidemic. It pulled us apart. The symptoms of clinical depression quadrupled in the first 6 months of the coronavirus epidemic and didn't recover. Part of the reason it didn't recover is a whole generation never figured out how to be in society and communion with their fellow humans during that period. Many people literally never went back to work in person, which is horrible. Virtual work is terrible for happiness. It's very good for convenience and terrible for happiness. And personally, I don't want our society to trade convenience for happiness anymore.
So take yourself out of Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School and put yourself in the seats of many of the educators that are here today in our secondary school systems across the country.
Right.
And with those influences that their pupils, their students have and live under every single day, what would you tell them are the three most important things that they should try and imbue in their students for the academic year to counter these unbelievably destructive incentives?
So part of it is the very practical thing that we talked about, which is getting the screens away from the students as much as we possibly can. I would have not just no phones in schools, I would have no devices at all in schools. And we've done this at the Harvard Business School, by the way. You can't bring any electronic device into my classroom. Not just me, it's the whole Harvard Business School. Paper and pencil and taking notes. Now, part of the reason that this is really important is because it's like amazing when pencils are an applause line, right? You know, it's we've gotten to that. That's right. It's slate. Is that good? I mean, like, you know, okay. So that's really important. That's the first thing that we can actually do. That's the first thing that we should do. The second thing is we need screens and devices out of school. Second thing is politics out of school. There's too much politics every place. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, yeah, right? I mean, it's astonishing to me the extent to which, especially in education schools, we've politicized the whole educational process. And I've seen it. And one of the reasons, you know, that a lot of people will say that Glenn Youngkin got elected in Virginia as the governor of Virginia, because people in Virginia were watching their kids on Zoom school and hearing what they were actually hearing. And it's not that they disagreed with the politics, they just didn't want politics in there the whole time. It felt like a propagandizing mission for what was going on in primary and secondary education. And there's way too much of it, and it's deleterious for the classroom experience. It's bad for the absorption of the actual knowledge that people need, and it's horrible for happiness. Why? Because it's setting people against each other. In school, we shouldn't be setting people against each other. And the third thing is that we actually need to be talking about the nature of human relationships a lot more. The number one module that my students care about is the module in my happiness class is the business of falling in love. Now, easy, right? Natural, right? People are a third less likely to say they're in love in their 20s today than they were in the 1980s when you and I were falling in love with our wives and getting married. I mean, look, that's all I cared about in the 1980s. Because that's normal, that's natural. You find that people don't have relationships in the same way that they did before. A lot of it is because of social media, but a lot of it is because of our culture. And the whole idea that dating is creepy, that getting together, falling in love, that even all kinds of in-person friendship is antiquated. That's a huge problem. More friendship, less politics, no screens. If I could do those three things, I would make a lot of progress.
Great advice, and I say that as a non-educator, but someone that tried to be impactful on 3 kids that I raised, and now
and they're doing great.
Now grandkids. So,
yeah. Grandkids are evidence that you did well.
Yeah,
actually.
Let's hope. Let's hope. Recently, and I think many of you know this, Arthur co-authored a book with Oprah. I just told you I'm going to actually give my wife a copy of the book for our anniversary because I know that it's been a resounding success. And obviously she's so fond of you because of the inspiration and the force you've got. But I think that one of her comments about happiness in the book was we need to feel the field and take the wheel. What did she mean by that? Was it this sort of tackling these forces and counterintuitively on the journey to happiness? What did she mean by that?
So the reason that I started working with Oprah Winfrey, I mean, believe it or not, she called me. Okay? She's a reader of my Thursday morning column in The Atlantic, and she was reading it during the coronavirus epidemic. She was locked down in her house in Southern California, just like everybody's locked down. And when you write for 500,000 people a week, you don't know who's reading. And she was reading, and I had a book that came out that you and I have talked about a couple of times called From Strength to Strength in 2022. She read it on the first day and called me up, said, "This is Oprah Winfrey." And I said, "Yeah, I'm Batman." It was actually Oprah Winfrey, and she wanted to talk about the book and see what we could actually do to get a bigger audience for these basic ideas of the science of happiness, because it's important. And as we got to working together, we've become really good friends over the past year and a half. We've been talking about what most people need and what people don't understand. All the people in her audience, all the people that I deal with as educators, as just public figures, what do we see? And the number one most baffling thing is the management of oneself. You know, it's funny, and I was talking to a guy 6 weeks ago on Wall Street, a guy we both know, and he said, "I did a $13 billion deal today, and I am super competent. I can do anything." And I went home to tell my wife, and she starts yelling at me because I forgot to empty the dishwasher this morning. And we had this big screaming fight, and then I didn't tell her about the big victory that I had, and we went to bed without talking. And he said, "I realized that I can manage $13 billion of other people's money, but I can't manage my own marriage." The problem that we have is that we don't know how to manage our own emotions. And the serious business of the startup of your life is understanding that you can manage your emotions or they can manage you, and most people are in the second category. The science is the secret to this, as a matter of fact. And so the book that we've written together and that we're on tour together a lot and we're talking about, we have a new podcast that's actually starting on Monday, as a matter of fact, about this, is The Serious Business of Emotional Self-Management, which is not about numbing your emotions with drugs and alcohol and behaviors that are addictive. It's not about avoiding your feelings, which will usually lead you to schisms in your relationships. That's the number one reason for divorce, as a matter of fact. No, it's about what we call, and what neuroscientists call, metacognition, and the techniques of self-management, where you move the experiences of your emotions to your prefrontal cortex, using techniques like journaling, like meditation, like prayers of petition, cognitive behavioral therapy, and actually learning to manage yourself with the same kind of seriousness as everything else. And if we do our job, this is our ambition, we're going to actually help turn this into a curriculum of metacognition that we can share for primary and secondary educators. That's our long-term vision.
Amazing, amazing. And it is, as you say, all about sort of trying to stick to what I say is a view on life, but it's, you say, a perspective, meaning, what are you here for? What is your mission? And you've written a lot about the importance of meaningful work. And the kinds of things that we can do to bring us joy. But you mentioned multiple models for career success. Talk a little bit about that. It's, I think, linear, expert, transitory, and spiral. What in the world does that stuff mean? How does it get us back and sort of on this path that you're advocating?
One of the things that my students at the Harvard Business School, the Kennedy School, that what they have in common is that they don't really understand what motivates them in their work, and they're being sold a bill of goods by the education system about what they're supposed to, what their ambition is supposed to look like. You know, when you're at a fancy business school, the school says basically you're going to get out of school and you're going to get a good job, and you're not going to keep that job forever, but you're only going to change when something is better, and you're going to move to the next rung of the ladder, the next rung of the ladder, the next rung of the ladder. And that's actually kind of panic provoking for a lot of the students because they feel like it's just not quite right. Well, there's a whole literature on this that I teach to my students and that we should be teaching to high schoolers as well, I believe, that there's really kind of 4 types of people and 4 types of careers for the greatest happiness and productivity. There's the old style careers, our dads, they had a career that we'd call an expert career, which is kind of slow and steady. You 2% raise, you don't kill yourself working, you're not, traveling to Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, and I'm not trying to hurt you. And you're doing something and getting a little bit better because it supports your lifestyle. And for a lot of people still today, that's a really good career path. That's the expert career path. It's kind of one career. You don't change. You're solid as a rock. They like you. But you don't have this ambition to work 80 hours a week. The career path that we tell our students that they have is called the linear career path, which is that always up, 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 kind of a stair-step approach, always in the same field, always getting better, always making more money, always having more prestige and power. Then there's the career path that a lot of people have that just simply supports a basic lifestyle. I'm gonna be a barista in Portland, and then I'm gonna do a long haul trucking thing out of Baton Rouge for a little while. And then I fell in love with somebody in Maine, so I moved there and found some work. That's called a transitory career. But what a lot of people have that we haven't emphasized quite enough, but we could today in a more progressive education and labor system, is called the spiral career. A lot of my students have what the spiral career, which is a series of mini careers. Every 7 or 8 years, you actually, or 10 or 12 or whatever your pattern is, you retool your career, you reinvent yourself, and every new career is actually built on the old one according to what your dreams and interests are. That's the future of our economy, quite frankly. That's the future where we can modularize our education, where it's not so stultifying and formal the way that it was before, where we're kind of skills-based and dream-based. That's really important because then we can create more value at different points in our lives and people can have more flexibility. I find that most of the women students that I have at the Harvard Business School, they're spirals. They want to start off and they want to do something in business, but then at some point they probably want to start a family, and that's going to affect their careers, and they don't want to feel bad about it. They don't want to feel guilty about it. They want to redesign their careers for those 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 years, and then they want to do something else. And the whole point is that the world should actually present itself according to their dreams, not trying to conform our lives to the constraints that the world actually brings us. We should have progressed beyond this point in our education system all throughout life that we can accommodate these different kinds of career patterns. And I'm a classic spiral. Every 10 years, I take my career totally down to the studs and refigure it. I was a CEO for 10 years. Before that, I was a professor. Before that, I was a French horn player. Now I'm a happiness guy. Next, I'll be a circus clown or a firefighter. I don't know. But the whole point is I'm spiraling around, and the world makes it possible. We could make it a lot easier for others.
And it was an amazing thing for those of us who've known you and worked with you, the fact that you were at such a pinnacle of a career in the not-for-profit think tank world and decided, hey, I'm going to leave this. And it took a lot of us by surprise, like you're kidding me, like this incredible model of success, and then you left it, and obviously now I've created another one. It's always about taking on that other mountain, and it obviously is about your positivity in life.
Well, and you too, because it was interesting, when you were in politics for 25 years, And then you took the investment banking exam.
The difference between me and you was mine was unscheduled in terms of getting off, that trajectory of upward mobility. You voluntarily said, hey, I'm going back down to the studs, which is so refreshing. And my question is, in life, and you see, America is so much about, that upward mobility, that dream. And if you see someone who has earned that success, you say, hey, I want to be that too. The problem is so much today is what we're seeing is that what is working in our political system is instead of valuing that other person's success and holding it up as a goal, now you're tearing that person down saying, well, the only way that he or she got there was through doing something that was unfair and disadvantaged you.
Right.
How did that happen, and how do we get back to what your model is, which is this incredibly inspirational positivity?
Yeah, we have a culture of envy, and that's un-American. It just is. There's lots of cultures. I've lived, off and on for the past 35 years in Barcelona, and my wife is from Barcelona, and I've lived there full time for a while and spent many summers, and it's my second home really, and I love it. It's great. But Spain is a natural culture of envy. When somebody is achieving, you just assume that they're corrupt. You just assume they've done something wrong. When you have a cyclist who's winning the Tour de France, say, yeah, well, that guy. You should be celebrating that. That's your fellow countrymen. That's a great thing. And that's more characteristic of what we do in the United States, where we admire people who are achievers. One of the great and deleterious consequences of our social media culture is that we're able to share every peccadillo, every embarrassing moment from our lives and the lives of other people. And this has led us into this culture of very malignant envy. We have a lot of people who are successful just on the basis of being famous for being famous, and we conflate that with people who have actually achieved. And that's a really important problem that we have. Actual achievement is admirable. It's worthwhile of our admiration, whereas famous for being famous, of course, is patently ridiculous. And we need to start helping young people understand the difference between the two. We need to understand. So what do we do? And the answer is that we actually start helping people understand that being a YouTube influencer is not a reputable career. Or it's probably not very long lasting. It's not a great thing to do with your time. But that people who really do achieve are admirable. We need more heroes. We need to be holding up admirable people of achievement more to young people today, as opposed to simply tearing down everybody as if since they're famous, it's prima facie evidence that they did something wrong or they're somehow predatory or exploitative.
Look, so much of that is applicable today to the educators in this room, but let's put ourselves, and certainly I've been there for almost 25 years, in the position of the office holders here. Yeah. And, again, I mentioned before what, almost brawls breaking out in our Congress. I'm not sure about the state legislatures, but thank goodness in Virginia, ours is very limited. Carrie's here. 45 calendar days on the odd years is probably the model to follow. But how do we, and I know Jeb, and Governor, you've talked a lot about sort of the lack of civility in terms of how the state capitals are conducting themselves now and the legislators. How do we get back there? How do you change the incentive? Because just like there's incentive to be the next Taylor Swift or the next big influencer on Instagram, the incentive today in our politics is just as corrosive. Right. And it seems to work. You can get more followers, you can get more contributors by going and doing these things that just seem so counter to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, the means of spreading ideas, there's a lot of good in there. I mean, there's a lot that you can learn from the new means of technology. Terrific, my kids, they learn a lot by, a video about Aristotle comes up in their YouTube feed and they watch it and they know that stuff. I mean, my son Carlos, my Marine, he owns 0 books. I've never met somebody who owns 0 books, but he knows everything. And the reason he knows so much is because he learns by different means. And so, not to denigrate the whole idea that we're going to get our information this way, but there's a dark side to it, which is that it valorizes outlandish behavior. And what it does is it creates an environment where we're going to reward one particular type of personality. Now, this is 7% of the population. It's called the dark triad. I've written about this, and the dark triad sounds bad, and it is. It's the confluence of 3 actual diagnosable personality characteristics: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. That's bad. Now, that doesn't mean a psychopath as an axe murderer. What this is narcissism, meaning I'm obsessed with everything about being about me. Machiavellianism is being fundamentally dishonest enough that I'm willing to hurt you to meet my ends. And trait psychopathy means I have no remorse about hurting you. This happens in 7% of the population. Ordinarily, they're shunned. They're unsuccessful. They're in jail. Prisons are full of dark triad personalities because they can't live among us very well. They exploit us, they hurt us, they break our hearts and empty our wallets. And they do so without any remorse. The problem is that in our current culture, we pump them up and put them in office. We're really, really good at electing them, and they kind of are id, and we enjoy watching malignant narcissists saying the things that we wouldn't dare say. They give us this tiny little thrill. And until we actually hold people in public office to the same behavioral standards that we hold our kids to, we're going to have this problem, quite frankly. And that starts with us as leaders. That starts with us not saying, and by the way, what does it mean? It means not condemning people on the other side, because that doesn't help. You know, saying that that outrageous person with whom I disagree shouldn't be in public office, sorry, no credibility. You need to actually start denouncing that behavior on your side, whatever your side is. And by the way, you've done it. I've seen you do it. I've seen Jeb do it. That's courage, by the way. Real moral courage is not standing up to the people with whom you disagree. Real moral courage is standing up to the people with whom you agree on behalf of those with whom you disagree. That's hard to do. You lose friends that way, right? So that's what we need to do as leaders. You know, what are we leaders for? What do we have these positions for? To feather our own nests and get more prestige or admiration? No, it's to actually use the capital. And the way that we use the capital is by standing up to the behavior that's actually systematically denigrating our society. And that's the way that we actually do it. Stand up to your favorite dark triad. You're going to get consequences as a result of that. But when we do that together, we can materially change the direction of our culture.
So I think we've got, yeah. I think we've got room for one more question, and I want to end on a positive note, because after all, it's Arthur Brooks, and you're the inspiration, I think, for so many around the country and the world now. We're in this age now where AI has become the topic du jour, and as I'm sure the educators see, and as well as the state elected officials, there's just a lot of focus now on what this is going to do to our culture, what this is going to do to the trust factor, and how you see maybe AI being a force for good. Right. Because there's a lot where people are saying this is going to take over the world and we're all doomed. Right. How do you see that going forward?
So I mean, AI is a mixed bag, and there's a lot of people that think that we're actually doomed, that the robots are going to come and kill us or something like that. That's almost certainly overblown. And the reason is because all these technological improvements, they do a lot of good, and they do some things that we don't like, and life marches on, mostly. The way for us to understand AI or any of these technologies is to understand that it's not going to solve the real problems that we have. The real problems that we care about. There's kind of two problems, not to be technical about it, but there's two kinds of problems in life. They sound the same, but they're not. There's complicated problems and complex problems. Complicated problems are solved by engineers. Complicated problems are solved by technology. They're ferociously hard to solve, but once you solve them, you can replicate the solution with effortless ease, like building a laptop computer or making a jet engine. Or making a toaster, for Pete's sake. I mean, that's a complicated thing to do, but it makes your toast, it costs $20, it lasts 15 years, and you don't burn your house down. It's amazing, right? But that's not the real set of problems that we have in life. The real problems that we have in life that we care about are complex problems. Complex problems have a completely easy to understand solution, but you can't solve it with any amount of computational horsepower. Love is complex. Your cat is complex. You know what it wants, but you don't know what it's going to do. A football game is complex. That's why it's so delightful to watch. That's why I want to watch NFL football, because I can't simulate it. I don't know what's going to happen. That's the complexity, the adaptive nature of the serendipity of life. But most importantly, my friendships are complex. My marriage is extremely complex. You know, my relationship with Carlos is complex, and that's why they're beautiful, and that's why I love them. The good news about AI is not that it can't solve our complex problems, but it won't solve our complex problems. We're left with the same set of issues as human beings that we always have. And the main thing that we need to work on over the course of our lives and pass on to the people that we love is the business of love, is to understand that there is no crutch. Social media won't do it, screens won't do it, the internet won't do it, YouTube won't do it, engineers won't do it. We need to get out there and love each other. We need to form the friendships and fall in love and get married and have babies and do all that complex and messy and hard stuff. And that's really the stuff of life. AI or no AI, we're made to love, and happiness is love.
Awesome. Let's join me in giving Arthur Brooks a hand.
Thank you. Thanks, Brad.